Welcome to Who Wrote That Up For You, a daily podcast that shines a light on the American justice system and its role in empowering the powerful to take from you. The justice system is the only branch of your government where an individual, rather than the collective, can make the system act for you. It puts power in the individual's hands, but it's broken and being used against you at a time when you need it most.
And welcome to Who Wrote That Up For You. I am Sonia Ebron, co-founder at Courtroom 5.
And I am Deborah Sloan, the other co-founder at Courtroom 5.
We have a delightful show lined up for you today. In a few moments, we will speak with Eric Peterson at Peterson Investigations. Eric is a private investigator operating out of Orange County, California. That's the Los Angeles region. So we'll be excited to talk with him about his company and all the wonderful cases he gets to work on. Before we get there, Deborah, what is on your mind today?
Well, I want to talk about this letter I got. I received basically a letter letting me know that I am part of a class of people who is suing a company, this hospital that I used to go to. And the thing that bothers me, and this kind of booted everything else off of my issue of the day list, but the thing that bothers me is that I know that they're going through all of this hassle. They're doing all of this work, and at the end, they're gonna cut a check that costs $25 to print and 25 cents to print, 40 cents to send, and the check is going to be for 15 cents. So I don't know who this helps. You know, I'm assuming that the companies change their ways, but I don't think so. I mean, they don't even pay enough to for that to be punitive. That just puts money in the pockets of people who already have it. And it's a shame. I really don't care about the fit, but it just really irks me that they're going to go through all of this and send me a $15 check telling me all this stuff. And it's just, I don't know. It just bothers me. I don't think it's how our courts are supposed to work.
You're absolutely right. Well, the money goes to the law firms, right? So you probably got that letter from one of the many
Yeah.
law firms that jumped into the suit, and their job is to get as many people affected by this thing, as many claimants as they can, because that affects the amount of money they get in settlement. It's all about settling the claim. So it's certainly a racket. What I'd love to see happen, I'll be honest with you, the next time I think I get one of those letters, if I have the bandwidth, which is rare, all right? But if I have the bandwidth, what I'd love to do is to opt out of the class, sue the company on my own. I get all the discovery. I get everything. I get to attend the depositions, all of that, just like I were a lawyer. And I'll get my own settlement. I guarantee it's going to be more than the 15 cents because I'm not paying one of those law firms, right? And I may even come up with different claims. I may even take the thing to court. To trial rather than settle. I mean, you never know what can happen, but I'm pretty sure I'm not going to have that kind of bandwidth. And now that I've announced it publicly, I'm probably not going to be invited to join a class anytime soon. But that would be a lot of fun, and to find as many other people in that class, just like the lawyers do, to represent themselves, to opt out of the class and represent themselves. And we can all have a great party about it. So, yeah, but that's obviously not going to happen anytime soon. I'll put that on my bucket list.
Yeah.
Thank you for raising that issue, though. That is a mess. It's all a racket, that's for sure. Well, at Courtroom 5, we believe the courts belong to the people, in particular to the people who use them. And so if you are in court without a lawyer, or you need to sue someone and can't find a lawyer to represent you, get yourself over to courtroom5.com. Try a limited version of our services for free, and we hope to provide some relief for you there. At this time, it's my pleasure to welcome Eric Peterson at Peterson Investigations out of Los Angeles, California. Eric, thank you for joining us on Who Wrote That Up For You.
Thanks for having me.
Fantastic. Eric, I have to tell you at the beginning, I love talking to private investigators. It seems to me the work you all do can go in so many different directions. There's so many things to find out, if you will, that somebody wants to pay an experienced private investigator to find out. I want to hear, first of all, about your background, what got you to being a private investigator, and about your company and the areas you specialize in.
Yeah, so I started law enforcement. Matter of fact, in outside of Chicago, just part time when I was 18. I grew up in Chicago, and then decided to come out to California and started at LAPD. I did 20 years in law enforcement, worked narcotics gangs, training officer. My last assignment was sergeant, and then I've been in this field since 2013. I split it between this and executive protection, but a lot of that kind of bleeds into the other, so it helps out tremendously. And so my business is Peterson Investigations, and we operate in Southern California, but we can go all over the state, and then we also get cases all over the country. And so, yeah, we deal with all types of criminal, civil, family law, restraining orders, stalking, every little aspect. So we're definitely the boots on the ground, so to speak, that will be the first call when nobody else can help an individual.
That's interesting. And I know in California, there's a licensing procedure for private investigators. It sounds like with your background as a police officer and a security expert, that wouldn't have been a challenge for you. What's the licensing process, though, like in California? Does it have to be maintained? What's that look like?
Yeah, so to become a private investigator in California, you have to have a certain amount of hours of investigative experience, and the law enforcement, background obviously helps. So the amount of years that you're in law enforcement would typically cover, I believe it's 6,000 hours. And then if you don't have that, you could potentially work at a law firm, work for another, private investigator like me. The test can be kind of difficult regardless of any sort of experience you have, because it's typically based on laws and labor laws and different types of aspects of investigations that you may or may not have experienced in law enforcement. So you definitely got to study, and a lot of people don't pass their first time, but yeah, and then you just renew it every couple of years. You obviously have to have a legitimate business. You have to have insurance and all that other good stuff to comply.
Fantastic. So then tell us about your clients. Who do you serve?
So my number one clients are typically attorneys, because those are the types of people that go to, they're the people that are called when somebody has a civil or criminal issue. But with the the benefit of the internet and Google and Yelp, people are taking their types of cases into their own hands, realizing that they may not be able to pay the $5,000 or $10,000 or even more retainer fee required for a particular attorney. So oftentimes I'm getting people from throughout the country calling, and a lot of times it's family law, stalking, child custody issues. So it could be family members, friends, individuals, anybody that's going through a crazy situation in their life. And typically the number one thing that I get is, I've never done this before. I've never called a private investigator before. I've never had to do this, or I don't know if you handled this type of case. And, with my law enforcement experience combined with this type of work, there's nothing nothing never ceases to amaze me with respect to people and money and cases and things like that. So, but that's a typical call I get. People are kind of taking things into their own hands because they realize that, perhaps the attorney may not be the most attentive to them. And what I always tell potential clients is nobody's going to care about your case as much as you do. I mean, I'm going to care, and you'll see in my reviews, I've had some great clients and they've applauded what we've done, but nobody's going to take the interest as much as the actual client. And so they need to be involved. So those are the types of people, but it runs the gamut between individuals, law offices, things like that.
That is fascinating. Let me just delve into that a bit. So, when someone who's representing themselves in a civil case contacts you, what are they looking to do? What kind of evidence are they looking to collect generally?
So an example would be a restraining order. So somebody's stalking. So they would, in my opinion, I'd have to have them lay out everything, and I typically have them make a chronological order of what's been going on, and I have them do that for every type of case that I deal with, because they have that intimate knowledge, and some of these things have been going on for a year or whatever, and so. I typically have them let me know what's going on, and then I'll dissect it. And more often than not, a lot of clients think that something's important, and maybe it may not be. So in other words, when I do go to restraining order court to help a client out, because a lot of times we'll be hired for the security portion of it as well, you'll see the judge and how they react to things. And in my opinion, testifying in court, whether you're an officer or a private investigator or a civilian, that's the best education you're going to have in terms of the procedure. So, when I went to a restraining order court for another client, you see what's pertinent and what's not. I mean, it's always good to have as much information as there, but judges and lawyers and people like me, they just want the facts, and they want them laid out, and then the evidence that are supporting the facts. And it needs to be clear, and it needs to be concise, or potentially you're not going to get that restraining order. We had another case, family law, where a person passed away, and the parents wanted custody, and the younger kids were living with people that had criminal backgrounds and no valid IDs, and there was drugs and weapons at the house. So we went through an extensive interview process with them, and they ended up getting custody. But you have to, because obviously the people, my clients, are going to be biased, and then the people that they're going against are going to be biased. We're just there to lay out the facts and make sure that everything's clear to the judge.
This is really fascinating, particularly the point you made about pro se litigants or self-represented litigants not always knowing what is pertinent, what the court will want to hear in terms of evidence. And I'm wondering if you ever find yourself wandering into providing legal advice to these people. I know it's a dangerous and sensitive subject there, but is that something you find it necessary to sort of couch the evidence that you collect for these people and explain to them why this isn't important, that may be important, that sort of thing?
Yeah, I always give the disclaimer, I'm not an attorney. However,
Yeah.
I'll tell them, especially when I had that initial call with them, I'll tell them, this is a case similar to a case that I've handled a month or two ago. And this is what we did. And this is the evidence that they had. And this is what was pertinent and what was not. So I'll give them my opinion. I'll say, listen, I've seen, and it doesn't have to be a particular judge, but I've seen this go down in court. And then I also bring my law enforcement experience into it, and let them know, hey, this is what I've also experienced in law enforcement. And sometimes they'll think that their case is the most important case in the city, or whatever the case may be. And they'll think that the police response is going to be a certain way, and it's not going to be. And then they'll think the court is, everybody's going to side with me. No, you have to lay everything out. So to answer your question, I always give that disclaimer, but I definitely speak to my experience and the recent things that we've done and the court proceedings to let them know this is what's going to happen. And then if they don't listen, they'll, oh yeah, I should have listened. But I try to give them that blueprint so they have a pretty good guide, because what's important to them may not be important and pertinent to the court.
That's right. That's right. That's fantastic. Do you get any pushback from attorneys when you are helping people who are representing themselves?
No, I'm really not involved in like the after process, so to speak, in terms of, I don't go to court with people unless it's for protection or they need me to be there for one reason or another. So I don't really have that interaction. And I think that, I would think that the attorney's a person first and foremost, and they would hope to understand that, somebody is going through a difficult situation and maybe have some empathy for them. So I haven't really experienced that.
That's fantastic. Great to hear that. And so I know that you've seen a lot of people trying to manage the court system, frankly, whether they have attorneys or not. What is some of the experience? Can you share some of that experience?
Yeah, they'll try to take things into their own hands, and whether it's maybe serving somebody with a process, with court paperwork, or going to restraining order court. And I think that using the restraining order or family law court as an example, not only you're dealing with emotions and people that you've had a relationship with, and then maybe the daunting experience of the paperwork and the procedure. And let's face it, most people in their life typically will not step foot in a courthouse unless it's jury duty. So um, yeah, I think that if we can help them every step of the way, and I think certain counties have been doing a good job that are advanced in terms of educating people on their websites and things like that. But they're definitely not laying a roadmap down, but they're definitely offering the assistance, and hopefully at the courthouse they're helping them out. So I think that in terms of having them go through it, I think it depends on the situation, because there's so many emotions and money's at play, and relationships, and child custody, that it's a tough thing for somebody to do, and unless they have maybe a calming force or relatives or friends to kind of lean on, or people like us to help them in the process, it can be extremely overwhelming. Even though maybe to the three of us it can be an easy task, they just don't want to deal with it because of the mental drain that they've already are experiencing.
That's fantastic. I think a lot of the people we serve don't understand the whole evidence game, the admissibility issues, what is pertinent, what's not, and so forth. And so we often recommend that people seek out a private investigator, not just to collect the evidence. Oftentimes they have the evidence themselves, they have the documentary materials themselves, but you, as the private investigator, are able to go and testify about that evidence, about that material, and be a somewhat objective witness to get that material admitted, whereas the person holding it and is directly involved wouldn't necessarily be able to do that. When people reach out to you then, who are not represented by counsel, what would you advise them to be prepared with to make the best use of your time as a private investigator?
So if it's a complex case or involving a lot of moving parts, I would have them sit down with me and we would go over it. And then I would have these light bulb moments that I'll take notes on, and then I'll explore those points a little bit more. So it's really about that preparation. And then I want them to be clear. I had one recently that was a pretty extensive stalking that turned into extortion, and it was a whole ball of mess. But I said, you need to lay this whole thing out, because they wanted to report it to the police, and I said, you need to show them what the crime is. So in other words, you have this thing, and they need to see clearly, hey, this is a crime, because you got to get past that first hurdle of police, and you got to get that past the second hurdle of the DA filing this. And then there's, so that could apply to the different courts. So I always want to have that preparation, and then they need to be very aware of the process, because, and then, hey, we need to serve them, and we need to properly document that, and make sure that everything's submitted to the court. And you really need to be on top of it, because sometimes, like I said, it's a mental drain, but people have work and kids and school and all these other responsibilities that, the case may go to the to the back burner. So it's all about that preparation. And if I could ease their pain on that first interview and maybe take that off their shoulders, then I'll do that. But they need to be involved, and they need to care about it. So that's the first and foremost thing.
That's fantastic. Really appreciate that. And so, one last question: when you collect evidence, Eric, are you the only one that can testify about what you found in the civil case, or do you often, recommend bringing in other people to do that testimony? Your client, for instance, wouldn't be able to testify about what she gave you, or would she?
So more often than not, I'm writing a declaration that lays out everything and is in accordance with what the attorney for the client wants. And so I like to work with the attorneys, or if I'm working on a criminal case where somebody's a victim, I like to make sure that the detective handling the case knows that I'm there and I don't want to step on their toes. So getting back to your question, oftentimes a declaration will do it. I have had to, testify on Zoom in the past couple of years, but oftentimes the other side doesn't want us to testify because we're coming with date and timestamp photos. We're coming with, hard evidence, and it blows them out of the water. And so they don't want us to be there because, everything's organized in a report, and you cannot dispute what we find, more often than not. So the evidence is pretty much enough for them.
Excellent. Excellent. Really appreciate that. And so, Eric, I want to share your website, petersoninvestigations.com, with our viewers. Thank you so much for joining us on Who Wrote That Up For You. Where else can people find you online?
So LinkedIn, obviously Eric Peterson, Peterson, and then the website. I do have Instagram and YouTube, trying to build out the YouTube a little bit more, but those are the major ones.
Fantastic. Fantastic. Thank you again for joining us, and continued success in your career. We'll have you on again.
Thank you so much, Eric.
You got it.
That's great.
That's great. Fantastic. Good to know that those sorts of resources are available, particularly nationwide. Folks, I think for certain kinds of cases could reach out to Eric, no matter where they are. So good to speak with him. So Deborah, tell us about the last quiz and what you have teed up for us next.
If you will remember, in the law, a breach occurs when, number one, a party does not perform their part of a contract. Number two, one party owes another party damages. Number three, a divorce is finalized. Or number four, a complaint is filed in a court of record. And of course, it's number one. In the law, a breach occurs when a party does not perform their part of a contract. Today's question, or today's quiz, is it true or false? You got 50-50 chance. You always have a right to appeal an adverse ruling in your case. True or false? You always have a right to appeal an adverse ruling in your case. And that's it. Okay.
All right, fantastic. That is great. I often, as I mentioned to Eric, want to see people who are representing themselves use a private investigator.
Mm-hmm.
They are often as valuable as a court reporter when you go into court and have to speak directly to a judge. The issues of evidence can make or break your case.
Exactly.
And so you may think, based on watching Judge Judy, that this piece of evidence is relevant. That's just going to, seal the deal for you. And it may turn out, based on the law in your state, that doesn't matter at all, right? And as Eric said, private investigators can sort of help you with that. Not only help you collect the evidence that is material or relevant to your specific issues, but first of all, they can do that without giving you legal advice. Nobody but a lawyer can give you legal advice, but folks like private investigators and some other professionals, court professionals, can just help you stay on track, help you understand the situation that you're in from the perspective of the law or from a judge. And so, if you've got some evidence and you've got some questions about how it's going to fit into your case, it's often a really good idea to at least speak with a private investigator in your area.
Yeah, and it took me a long time to realize how important they are. There are just certain things you can't do in court without having hired a private investigator to make sure that your facts are correct. But on a practical note, a private investigator or any kind of expert makes you feel as if you're not isolated, and I think that's one thing for pro se litigants. That's one of the things that's really, really difficult. there, of course, a lot of emotion come up. You're angry, you're scared, you're upset. But if you have an expert or a private investigator or somebody like that, even if they're not, they're professional. They're not gonna, they may not be a shoulder to cry on, but they're there with you, and I think that's really, really important for emotional success in your case.
Yeah, absolutely. Fantastic. All right. Well, that's all we have for you today. Thanks as always for joining us, and we will see you again soon.
Are you feeling beleaguered, angry, or afraid, as if things are spinning out of control and you're powerless to stop them? It's easy to just let things slide and hope they don't get worse. But they often do get worse. The thing is, you're not powerless. Our courts belong to us, and their purpose is to give power to the powerless. Don't let your grievances pile up without redressing them. You can handle this in court. Or, if someone takes you to court, you can take them to school.